He bought a boat he didn't know how to sail, with a woman he'd met on the other side of the world, for $5,500. They had zero experience, a Jack Russell Terrier, and a YouTube channel that documented every moment they nearly sank. For years, millions of people watched. Then one of them disappeared, and the channel kept going anyway. That man is Mark Farnworth, the person behind Wildling Sailing. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how a channel that began as one of the most unlikely love stories on the internet became something far more complicated, and in some ways, far more remarkable than it ever was at the start. Mark Farnworth grew up in Preston, a city in northwest England that has no ocean view, no sailing culture, and no particular reason to produce someone who would one day attempt a solo transatlantic crossing on a 47-year-old Polynesian catamaran. His parents owned powerboats, summers on the Lynn Peninsula, weekends on Conwy Bay. That was the extent of it, a passenger's relationship with water, not a sailor's. He moved to Kunming, China in his 20s to teach English as a foreign language. Kunming sits in Yunnan province, in the south of China, surrounded by mountains and completely landlocked. It is about as far from the open ocean as it's possible to get. And it's there, in a landlocked city in the middle of a country with no access to his parents' powerboats, that Mark Farnworth decided he wanted to sail around the world. He'd picked up a sticker somewhere in Thailand, an advertisement for a sailing crew, illustrated with dolphins and tropical islands. He stuck it on the head of his bed. It read, "Do you want to sail the world with me?" He kept it because he liked the look of it. He didn't act on it. Not yet. What changed everything wasn't a plan. It was a woman. Nadiana grew up in the landlocked city of Kunming with a very specific dream. When she was a child, someone told her a story about a woman who lived alone on a boat in the North Caribbean. Every morning, that woman climbed the mast and dived into blue water for her morning swim. Nadiana heard that story and decided that's the life she wanted. She'd already shown she was serious about doing things her own way. At 15, she left home and went to Singapore alone to study. She traveled through South America by herself. She took a sailing course in Thailand. Before she ever met Mark, before she had a boat, before any of it was remotely possible, she was building towards something. When she moved back to Kunming and met Mark Farnworth, she saw the sticker on his bedhead. "Do you want to sail the world with me?" For Mark, it was a found object. For Nadiana, it was a sign. They got together, they made a plan. Mark was promoted to school manager, which meant a higher salary, which meant a number to aim for. They calculated that if they saved aggressively for 18 months, they could afford to quit, buy a boat, and attempt to live at sea for a few years. Not forever, a few years, just to see. That's when the math stopped and the real decision had to be made. And it tells you everything about the people involved, that they actually made it. In 2018, Mark and Nadiana bought a 1967 Colvik Sea Rover they named Good Tidings for $5,500. Neither of them had ever sailed. They were in Peelheli Marina in North Wales, about to take it out for the first time. They anchored wrong. They nearly ran the boat onto rocks within the first few trips. A stranger in another boat shouted instructions at them from across the water. They filmed all of it. That was the genius of what became Wildling Sailing. It launched in November 2018, and it did not look like other sailing channels. There were no drone shots over turquoise water, no sponsored catamarans, no couples who already knew what they were doing pretending to struggle for the camera. It was two people learning, failing, recovering, and being completely honest about all three. Mark is from Preston, Nadiana is from Yunnan. They have no sailing background, no money behind them, and no exit plan. The internet found that extremely watchable. They sailed Good Tidings from North Wales to Paris, through the Channel de Four, past Brittany, into the French canals. They sold Good Tidings and then a second boat called Minka to fund a bigger project, a 1975 Sailcraft Cherokee 35 catamaran, 35 feet long, which they proceeded to restore from a deteriorating hull into something capable of crossing seas. They got it to the Mediterranean. Nadiana described it as feeling like a concentrated life. One moment you're fighting for your survival, the next you're looking at a landscape so beautiful you almost cry. They reached 60,000 subscribers while living on roughly $6 a day and describing it as enough. And then something happened that the audience didn't see coming. For a channel built on radical transparency, on showing the engine failures and the rope that slipped and the arguments with bureaucracy, the split was unusually quiet. After roughly 4 years together on the water, Mark and Nadiana separated. They sold the Cherokee 35 catamaran to a fellow sailor and split the money. Mark kept the dog, the Jack Russell named Yoshi, who had been in the videos since the beginning. He kept the channel, And Nediana flew home to China, to her family in Yunnan, and stepped away from the project they had built together. There was no dramatic announcement, no breakup video, no he said she said in the comment section. The channel simply went from being called Wildling Sailing, plural, a partnership, to Wildling Sailing. One letter dropped, one person gone. The sailing community noticed, the forums discussed it, articles were written, and Mark, to his credit, did not turn the separation into content. He mourned it privately, or at least off camera, and then he did something that told you exactly who he is. He found the most broken, most neglected boat he could possibly take on, and he got to work. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. The Wildling Mahi 42 is not a conventional catamaran. It's a Polynesian-style double canoe, a design philosophy that goes back thousands of years, adapted in the 20th century by a British designer named James Wildling, who believed that indigenous Pacific navigation techniques produced the most seaworthy hulls ever built. The Mahi 42 is 42 feet long, made up of two separate hulls connected by beams and a platform, designed to flex rather than resist the ocean. The one Mark found had been sitting at anchor, neglected and abandoned, for approximately a decade. He named it Mahi. The name came later. First came the work: structural rot, missing hardware, a hull that hadn't moved under its own power in years. If the Cherokee restoration had been significant, this was something on a different scale entirely, and Mark did it alone. That's the part that changes the shape of this whole story. Wildling Sailing had been two people, two perspectives, two sets of hands, two presences on camera that gave the channel a human texture that a single host can't replicate in the same way. When Nadiana left, the obvious move would have been to find a new partner, or to pivot the format, or to start fresh on a different platform. Mark did none of those things. He picked up a tool, pointed the camera at a rotting hull, and said, essentially, watch this. The audience watched, and the numbers went up. By the start of 2025, Mark was still deep in the restoration. Mahi was in a boatyard. The videos from this period have a completely different atmosphere from the early Wildlings content. There are no dinners cooked in the galley, no two-person decisions about which anchorage to use, no one to hand him a tool when both his hands are full. It's grimier, more solitary, and in its own way more honest than anything that came before it. In June 2025, Mark left the boatyard. On a rebuilt, refitted, 47-year-old Polynesian catamaran, the kind of vessel that makes professional sailors raise their eyebrows, he began sailing south along the Atlantic coast of Spain and into Galicia. He rounded the capes that experienced crews take seriously and sail with caution. He did it without a crew. His channel had passed 103,000 subscribers by this point, with over 17 million total views. That figure is worth sitting with for a moment. The channel grew substantially after the split. The couple who started with nothing built something big together, and then the solo version of the same channel kept building. Mark was sailing toward Portugal to find a boatyard capable of handling the final preparations for what came next. The transatlantic crossing he's been pointing toward since he bought a sticker in Thailand that said, "Do you want to sail the world with me?" And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. Wildling Sailing started as a love story, and a lot of people who discovered it early would tell you it was the chemistry between Mark and Nadiana that made it work. And they'd be right. There's an ease between them in the early videos, a genuine mutual interest, a sense of two people who genuinely cannot believe their own luck. She's fearless and spontaneous. He's methodical and dry. It worked. But the channel after Nadiana left revealed something else. It showed that what Mark built wasn't just a relationship made visible on camera. It was a specific kind of work ethic and honesty about that work. He doesn't romanticize what he does. He doesn't frame a failing piece of hardware as an adventure. He just fixes it, documents it, and moves on. Among a genre of YouTube channel that increasingly looks like a lifestyle magazine shot on a luxury catamaran somewhere glamorous, that quality is genuinely rare. The Wildling Mahi 42 is not a glamorous vessel. It is a two-hulled, 47-year-old piece of maritime history that was left to rot by whoever owned it last. Bringing it back required skills Mark learned as he needed them, not at a sailing school, not with a professional crew, but the same way he learned everything else on this channel, by doing it, filming it, and letting people watch him figure it out. There's a reason that Facebook comment from a longtime viewer exists. Someone who said they'd been following since Mark's very first upload, looking to buy his first boat in the UK. And the reason is that the channel never became something other than what it set out to be. It just became a version of itself that its original audience had to reckon with. The same man, The same philosophy, half the people. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. A solo transatlantic crossing in a Wildling Mahi 42 is not a casual undertaking. The Wildling design has crossed oceans before. James Wildling himself sailed one across the Atlantic in the 1950s with 2 women and no engine, which is a sentence that deserves a beat of silence. But the people who attempt it do so with a clear awareness of what they're dealing with. Mark has been preparing for this for years. The restoration took the better part of 2 years of documented work. The solo passages south through Spain were a shakedown. Portugal was where the final preparations were to happen. And somewhere in the second half of 2025, after spending the better part of a decade building toward a dream that began with a sticker in Thailand and a woman who heard a story about a Caribbean sailor, Mark Farnworth was pointing the nose of Mahi toward open water. The channel his audience follows is not the channel his audience originally found. There is no Nadiana. There is no couple. There is no shared project that 2 people built together from a rented apartment in China. What's left is a man from Preston, a half-century-old Polynesian catamaran, and about 3,000 miles of Atlantic Ocean standing between him and whatever comes next. That's the whole story of Wildling Sailing. Not a departure, not a scandal, not a pivot, just a life that kept moving when the plan that shaped it changed beyond recognition, and a camera that kept rolling while it did. Some channels exist because 2 people make something together that neither of them could make alone. And when that partnership ends, the most honest thing you can do is keep going anyway. Not to prove something, not to fill a gap, but because the thing you were building was always bigger than the relationship that started it. Mark is currently working toward completing his transatlantic crossing in Mahi, the rescued Wildling Mahi 42 that was abandoned for a decade before he found it. Whether he crosses solo, what ports he hits along the way, and what the channel looks like on the other side of that ocean, that's the next chapter, and it's one the audience of 103,000 people who stuck around after everything changed will be watching. So here's the question. Do you think the channel is better, worse, or just different now that it's Mark alone? Because the comments have been split on that for 3 years, and there's no clean answer.